I start looking in the camera. All right. So my name is John Allan Namu. I am an investigative journalist and the co-founder of Africa Uncensored. But once upon a time, I also was a rugby player. So my rugby playing days began in high school. I played rugby for St. Mary's Nairobi, which at the time was one of the best, if not the best, rugby schools in the country. I had the privilege of playing against playing for and alongside and with and against a lot of rugby greats in this country. Some of my teammates included people like Alan Hicks, Charles Cardovillis. One of my contemporaries went on to become one of the most prolific players in Kenya Rugby Sevens, Ben Yam, who is now the head coach of Nondis. I rose to become captain of the squad over the 2001-2002 season. And then I went into club rugby for 2003 season, 2003, 2004, 2005, where I played for Nondis. I played for Nondis for the Kenya Cup squad. While we weren't successful, I had my own personal successes within the club, being nominated as Young Player of the Year in 2004 and Player of the Year in 2005, my final season. And I also was able to, albeit briefly, represent the Kenya in the Kenya Simbas team in the year 2004 and 2005. Yes. Starting off of the bench mostly, but it's still something that I'm very, very honored to have done.
Maybe take me through the transition between rugby, being a rugby player, and now you are now an investigative
journalist. Well, I also had the passion for journalism, and while I was playing for Nondis, I was also in university. So at university, I had the time to be able to develop my skill set, to go to the gym, to do all of the things that I needed to do to be able to develop myself as a rugby player. I wish I had more time to do so, but the profession of journalism requires a lot more time than I could spare, and then continue with rugby. When I look back, maybe I could have budgeted my time a little bit more and maybe had one or two more seasons. But it's a sacrifice that I'm glad that I made. I think the investment in terms of time that I've made in my profession has paid off in various ways. But I do miss rugby. I do follow the local leagues. I still am a very avid supporter of my club and Nondis. Look at their performance this year; it's been nothing short of phenomenal. After just 2 seasons ago, coming from relegation to being a squad that met Cabras in the semi-finals of the Kenya Cup, and Nondis being essentially the only amateur side to have made it to the semi-finals.
Can you compare rugby between your days
and rugby today?
Now? Maybe is there a gap?
Oh well, yeah. I think there's been quite a bit in terms of development. Of course, the rules of the game have also changed and improved. There's a lot more focus on safety, player safety, and you can see that in the rules around where you're supposed to tackle a person, how you're supposed to put them on the ground. Some of the the contact situations are better managed now. So in terms of the direction of rugby, I think it's good. The size of rugby players has also improved significantly. I mean, the big boys now that are playing for all sides, both amateur and semi-professional sides. I think the impact of Kenya Sevens to build the profile of Kenya Rugby has been great, but we still have some of the same problems that bedeviled us.
What do you think the government should do to uplift the standard?
I don't think it's so much a government issue. See, the Kenya Rugby Union is self-governing, right? And the government can only come in perhaps as and when needed, maybe through support in terms of the sports fund, and advice in terms of governance, because is rugby is a sport that has become almost like an ambassador for the country. I'd say what we need to do in Kenya Rugby Union is to cut all of the crap with corruption. It's incredibly embarrassing that in this day and age, we have directors from different parts of the country who are embezzling funds directly from players. We have still same allegations of coaches taking per diems from players um, so that they can make the squad. I mean, rugby is an incredibly hard sport. People work hard to be able to make those teams. People's dreams have been staked on achieving success in the same way that the Kayange brothers or the Simiu brothers or the many, many heroes that we've had across the space of time. And, and to deny people that opportunity because you want to make a few shillings, it's shameful. It's really shameful. Rugby is a sport where the people who play are men of honor. But the dishonorable things that I've seen happening are just, it's nauseating. And I'd hope that by this time, it's not just three teams that are able to attract funding and support to professionalize. Kenya should be one of the best, if not the best, rugby playing nations on the continent consistently, right? We shouldn't be competing, and this is no disrespect to Uganda, but we shouldn't be competing with Uganda. Our objective should be to compete with the Springboks, should be to consistently beat Namibia, should be to have players playing in the French league, right? To be playing in the Premier League in the United Kingdom, to be playing in South Africa, right? But also to have an incredibly strong local league. All our success starts from our local leagues, and that is right down from age grade rugby. I'm particularly excited that someone in the person of Paul Odera is now the director of rugby in Kenya Rugby Union. I've had occasion to have been coached by Paul. I've had occasion to observe the kind of philosophy that he brings to the sport, and I know personally that he is a man of integrity. Those are the people that we require to be able to change the sport.
As you speak to, they find that most of the clubs that are in Kenya, they are owned by individuals and not community. Maybe do you feel that there is need for some clubs to be
Explain that. Like which individuals own clubs?
institutions and also the individuals, people are coming up with the club. Yeah. Do you feel that there's need the government to help these people and also maybe the community to inject funds and maybe come up with a community clubs like the one that you see in football?
So a lot of clubs are actually run by what you'd call societies, right? With governance structures, etc. That mean that they're not owned by one person. Maybe the chairmanship doesn't change that often, and that makes it look like the ownership is of one person, right? But where you have a good point is that any sport any sport needs to have support at the grassroots level. So if you see the structure of village football tournaments, like for instance in Bungoma, especially Western Kenya, they've got a very robust football leagues at the village level, at the sub-county level, at the county level, and they've also got good age grade rugby and football. That's the model that we need. Rugby needs to be something that children across the country wake up on Saturdays and Sundays and during the weeks to play. It should be part of the curriculum, right? I don't know if it's still part of the curriculum in Kenya schools. It should be one of those core sports that we focus on. Oh yes, for sure. I mean, we've already demonstrated that in terms of natural raw talent, we've had it. But not just that. Our players, if just given the opportunity, can compete across the world, right? But you can't, rugby is a sort of thing that you can't just, because you're big and strong, think that you're going to make it all the way. Rugby is a game of intellect, of real intellect. And that kind of intellect is both studied but experienced. The best rugby players have been playing for a long time, right? Look at some of the best players in the world. Look at Bowden Barrett. Look at let's see, um, Peter Steph Dutoit, right? Look at all of these guys. These guys have been playing rugby since they were children, since they were almost babies, right? Why not? We have some stadiums in Bukungu that are calling people over the weekend to play rugby. Why not, right? We need to disabuse ourselves of this notion that rugby is this violent sport. It's not, right? Yes, it's a contact sport, but it's an incredibly, like, it's a game of real intelligence.
So, do you mean corruption is the one that is trying to interfere with our sport?
In large part, I believe so, right? I've had occasion to look at some of the things, being presented with some of the things that have been happening. I remember from my playing days, whether it was corruption or not, we used to be paid like a pittance in terms of allowances, like for game day and training. By the time I left, and I hadn't played for very long, I played for 3 years, 2 years in top flight Kenya Rugby. It was like something like 500 bob, 1,000 bob. I never got paid, right? I was there because I was passionate about it, right? And that now there's some money that's coming into rugby, and there are people who are looking at it purely as an opportunity to enrich themselves. That's the kind of culture that we must stamp out. Because look at what it's done to football. Look at what it's done to all of these other sports. That's the problem in our sporting. It's that people think that they own the sport and they start to use it as a tool to be able to enrich themselves. Before they know it, they've personalized it so much that they push everybody out. I've seen it in swimming, I've seen it in basketball, I've seen it in volleyball, right? In cricket. These are things that we used to be in hockey, we used to be hugely successful at as a nation in the 70s and the 80s. Why are we not successful today? We must ask ourselves that question. And we don't all have to be lawyers, engineers, etc., etc. Why can't we be sportsmen and women?
Maybe what's your comment on the upcoming rugby players?
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe what can you comment on this young generation?
I think, look, so I've been away from rugby like actively for a long time. So I don't want to comment on specific individuals. I'm still trying to figure out who's who, etc. But from my very distant observation, there's two things that need to happen. I think some of the older players really need to invest time back in the club. This is what I admire the most about Nondis. Nondis has a very strong playing unit, but it also has a very strong unit of former players who give their time, their energy, their effort to support the boys, not just in terms of making sure they make it for fixtures, but in terms of mentorship, right? Like, how do you lead yourself as a young man? How do you become a man beyond the sport? I benefited myself from the mentorship of people of the likes of Alan Hicks, of Branko at Nondis, of Branko Ninja. I mean, I benefited from the wealth of experience of people like our former chairman, Auka Geshao. Like, there's so many people who poured into me their experience that made me the person that I am today. And that's why I love the club. That's why I think that the Nondis model is really something to look into and to invest in.
Your final thoughts?
Well, my final thoughts are that, you know, in as much as there are a lot of things that need cleaning up in rugby, rugby is a beautiful game. It's one that we Kenyans have shown that we can and have excelled at. And it's one that can really drive not just the futures of individuals, but the economies of entire, regions, if not the entire country. I'd say Western Kenya should be the spiritual home of rugby, just for the sheer amount of raw talent that comes from here, right? Um, but we haven't even tapped into the capacities of other parts of the country. We don't know what lies in the coastal regions, right? Like, we don't know what lies in central, in northern Kenya, right? We don't think about rugby as this thing that can really change the lives and the fortunes of millions of people. And I'm a big believer in that. But we need to be able to get our fundamentals right. Thank you.